There are few running backs after week 1 that you should be looking at to target in trades right now. These are guys that I believe a ton of people are overreacting just from 1 week of playing time, and you can take advantage of that. And for what it's worth, I've helped over 15,000 people win their fantasy leagues the last few years alone, and I plan to do the same in this video for you. And we're going to start with the veteran Derrick Henry, yes, the 30-year-old running back with the Baltimore Ravens who played all the way back on Thursday Night Football. And here's the thing. It started out nice for Derrick Henry. He had an early touchdown. I think he had like the first touchdown of the season. You cashed the over a half a touchdown. He's in your fantasy lineup doing well, but then things got bad. Because unfortunately, our king only ended up with 13 carries for a measly 46 yards. He was averaging about 3 yards per carry or so, and that touchdown really saved his day as he barely broke 10 fantasy points. Did get 2 targets, but no receptions in the game. So overall, it didn't look all that great. And then we pull up this number to see his snaps in the game. He plays just 37 snaps. This is according to PFF, while Justice Hill plays 43 snaps because the Ravens were trailing in this game often. Justice Hill was on the field more, and as you can see right here, this number 6, that's the amount of targets Justice Hill got as they were playing from behind. Hill played 54% of the snaps in this game, and Derrick Henry came off the field. So now it's an alarming concern that Henry's not going to see touches. I've seen plenty of Derrick Henry managers just concerned right now, but listen, they're not going to play Patrick Mahomes and the back-to-back Super Bowl champions every week. The Ravens are only underdogs 2 more times this year. So don't expect them to be trailing in games all that much this season, if at all. And Derrick Henry, in what should be the worst game script he plays in all season, trailing by 2+ scores for most of the game, he still saw 13 carries and 2 targets, 15 opportunities in the worst game script, finds the end zone, gets you 10 fantasy points. And again, in my opinion, he's going to be seeing, moving forward, 16+ touches in a more favorable environment with weeks where he sees 20+ touches. And I know John Harbaugh recently stated, oh, we don't want to give him 30 carries. That's fine. Nobody's getting 30 carries besides Joe Mixon in week 1. If Henry still gets 16 to 18+, that's fine. And look, 13 touches for 46 yards isn't great, but let's give this offensive line that was really struggling some slack, because as you can see that Rich says here on Twitter, cut them some slack because their offensive line coach, you can see Joe right here, ended up dying 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago he ends up dying, so rest in peace to him. And then they have to play a season, and he was with the team for 8 seasons. Of course there's going to be some struggles, in-game adjustments when you don't have your coach for the past 8 seasons. So if the Henry manager in your league is starting to get concerned about him, and you can start to say, oh my God, this guy's never going to catch passes with Lamar Jackson, and he's going to be 31 years old soon. You can say all those things to try and sweet talk him if you want, or you can just tell him straight up, hey, I want to buy low on Derrick Henry, what you going to trade me for? And you want to do this right now, because this is probably your last chance. Maybe later in the season, but right now is the biggest panic time between week 1 and week 2, and the Ravens are going to be 9.5-point favorites against the Raiders next week, who, oh yeah, just gave up 135 yards on 10 carries to J.K. Dobbins. So I'm pretty sure Derrick Henry, who still looked good last year, who still looked fine in week 1 on his limited touches when he actually got room to run, I think he's going to be just fine. So trade for him now before he faces the Raiders and potentially scores 2 touchdowns, because then you're never going to be able to get this guy again for like a potential 4th round value in a trade. Now, the next man I want to talk about is Jaylen Warren, and I saw some of the comments. People got in the comments and said, oh, Sal, one of your favorite picks in the draft was Jaylen Warren. Oh, he got me like 1 fantasy point or 4 fantasy points in week 1. Listen up, buddy. We already told you this heading into the week. You shouldn't have been starting Jaylen Warren. He was a flex option at best because he was injured with a hamstring. I can't believe I just buddied the audience. I mean, I hate getting buddied, so that's absolutely brutal. But Jaylen Warren gets a hamstring injury to miss multiple weeks. This was 23 days before the first game. A mild hamstring injury like this takes on average at least right around 3 weeks, so 21 days to come back from. So that's just to come back from, to like go back to your office job. In terms of return to play, yes, he was good enough to be out there, but clearly they limited his usage, and you can see that in his snaps. Najee Harris goes out there and plays 38 snaps. Jaylen Warren just 22 snaps, and on his 22 snaps, as you can see all the way to the right side right here, just 2 carries compared to 20 for Najee Harris. I know Arthur Smith is a little bit crazy. He even gave Cordell Patterson 9 snaps and 4 carries. I know he likes bigger backs. We saw that with Tyler Algier last year with the Atlanta Falcons, and then Najee Harris gets 20 carries in this game, but I'm pretty sure the hamstring injury that kept Jaylen Warren from not practicing in full and missing multiple weeks of camp and practice is probably a reason why he's not seeing a full workload. And look, I'm going to be honest with you. There's still a chance that Jaylen Warren isn't 100% healthy for another week or 2. Your best case scenario with a hamstring injury that's like that, a mild hamstring, is 2 to 3 weeks just to get back to feeling yourself. A lot of people take about 4 to 6 weeks to feel fully back to themselves, and that's about the pace that we're looking at for Jaylen Warren. It's been about 4 weeks right now, so there's a chance if he plays, he's still not 100% for another week or 2, and you might see a weird Cordell Patterson usage. You might still see these 20+ touches for Najee Harris, but I'm telling you to trade for him before he potentially pops off, because we know how good this guy is. We talked about it all off season. We saw it last year. I'm pretty sure the coaches know this too. They continue to give him increased usage, so I don't think him seeing 4 total touches for 20 yards and 4 fantasy points is going to continue, and it could change as soon as this week in my opinion, because again, as a reminder, he was top 10 in yards per touch and explosive run rate last year while ranking number #1 in broken tackle rate. And for what it's worth, I don't think Justin Fields is going to be starting for this team the rest of the season. I could be completely wrong on that. Mike Tomlin did not yet name a quarterback. Joe Russell Wilson is dealing with the calf injury. I think that Justin Fields barely got them over the finish line, didn't really do much as a passer, just didn't turn the ball over, which is something that's probably coming down the line if he's forced to throw more against a team that's not the Atlanta Falcons, who struggled in week 1. And when Russell Wilson returns from this injury, and if indeed, like I think, he will start at the quarterback position, there's just going to be more check down opportunities for Warren, and Justin Fields is more of a mobile rusher, so he could steal some takeaways on the ground and in the red zone, where you're not really going to get that with this version of Russell Wilson anymore compared to Justin Fields. You probably would have about 4 or 5 years ago, but not at this point. So I don't think you have to trade much for Warren right now. Heck, in some 10-man leagues with shallow benches, people are probably considering and probably will drop him. So go ahead and, if you need to, trade for Warren, have him as an add-on and a piece, maybe in another deal that you take from the player in this video. But I do think Warren is a buy low opportunity. Now, this guy's not going to be a buy low opportunity, but I still do think you should trade for him. And it's James Conner, who had 19 PPR points in week 1. And typically I'm looking for guys who had strong roles but didn't produce in week 1. Conner did have a strong role and produced in week 1, so you're going to have to pay a little bit more. In fact, Conner had a huge role. When you look at his rush attempts of 16 right here, and you look at his targets of 4, he had 20 overall opportunities, over 80 total yards, finds the end zone again, goes over 19 PPR points for you. No matter the format you're playing in, James Conner was probably right around a top 10 running back, definitely a top 12 running back on the week for you. And here's the thing. I want to discuss just what we saw overall in his usage heading into week 1, because it was highly encouraging. You can see right here, according to PFF, Conner played 41 of 61 snaps. So he's playing about 67% of the snaps. And the encouraging part is that Trey Benson, the rookie running back, the 3rd round pick that I was excited about when they first drafted him, but he did not have a good camp, and then we were basically off of him. He only got 8 snaps in this game. You scroll over to the overall touches, 16 carries for James Conner, nothing for the backup in this game, Amari DiMercato, and just 3 carries for the rookie Trey Benson. Now, of course, this is just week 1. The rookie can come along, these things can change, but for week 1, this usage right now for James Conner looks extremely strong, and maybe even more importantly, the Cardinals offense, what they did against Buffalo in week 1 seems encouraging, that they can move the ball and score, more upside for that offense and James Conner. So I do think that James Conner is probably a top 12 running back in the rest of season rankings that I'll be dropping later this week. Again, if you're part of the blueprint, over 15,000 people, you can go ahead and get those rest of season rankings. So I do think he's a top 12 running back, just like he's been the last 2 years in Arizona moving forward. And here's the thing. In week 2, it's the time to get him, because after week 2, you might not be able to. The best game environment on the week, where the Cardinals are actually home favorites now, 1-point favorites against the Rams, a 50-point total right here. This is a great environment for scoring and fantasy in general. We saw David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs put up over 160 total yards against this Rams defense last week. That's lacking Aaron Donald this season, and you can tell. So right now is the time to go trade for James Conner. Again, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny for it, but maybe you can get some sort of deal, a combo deal going forward. You know, maybe not a pretty penny, but a decent penny for it as a top 10 running back performer in week 1. Now, I did mention those rest of season rankings. They'll be dropping on Wednesday, depending on when you're watching this. It's probably already out, and we already have out the waiver wire tiers and tools for this week. We'll have them out for every week. Later in the week, the game-by-game matchup notes for every single game, the projections and rankings for every single player that's going to be fantasy relevant, even if you're in super deep sicko leagues. And I'm telling you all this because this is a part of the fantasy blueprint that over 15,000 people, and potentially your league mates right now, are getting access to risk-free. That's the big thing, risk-free this year. And you can get access to it as well with the link in the description below. It's risk-free through one of our 2 partners this season. And what does risk-free means? Well, here you go, right here. It means if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, you follow just the simple steps to go ahead and get the blueprint, I'll 100% refund your one-time payment of $10. It's risk-free if you don't make the playoffs. Just $10 for the entire year. You get all those tools every single week. I'm sending you updates throughout the week as well. You get access to the Discord as well, where you can go in there. You can ask me a question depending on what access point you have, and all that and more. Long story short, you can scan this QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below to get access to your fantasy blueprint and join the 15,000 others right now who have access. Go ahead and get it. It's a limited time offer. So go ahead and smack your league mates around with that tool. The next man I want to talk about is Jonathan Brooks. And yes, I can't quit Jonathan Brooks. And yes, I want to buy low on Jonathan Brooks because he's currently getting 0 points for people as he's on, reminder here, as he's on, according to Twitter, and this is a couple weeks ago from Underdog, and per Adam Schefter here, Jonathan Brooks' a knee will remain on the PUP list, will miss at least 4 games. Now, that's important at least. He could miss 4, but as of right now, there's no news on a potential setback. And here's the thing for Jonathan Brooks. The Panthers offense, look, I get it. The Panthers offense looks absolutely atrocious. They lost 47-10 against the Saints team that a lot of people probably underestimated because of a poor offensive line and an aging defense. But this offense from the Panthers, just like it was last year, despite all the improvements, looked bad. But like we said, from week 1 to week 2 and moving forward, things should start to change. We'll see our biggest improvements during that time. But the good news for Jonathan Brooks, who ideally is going to be returning in 3 weeks, is none of the Panthers running backs looked good in week 1. In fact, according to PFF, this was a split backfield where Chuba Hubbard, as we expected, saw the majority of the snaps with 32, but Miles Sanders was in there for 22 snaps. Then you look at the carries. Yes, they were trailing big in this game, so this matters. Only 6 carries for Chuba Hubbard, 5 carries for Miles Sanders, who's on the field more as a passing down back as they trailed. That's why he gets the 1 target right here. So overall, this was not a good outlook for Chuba Hubbard or anybody to make an impression to say, oh yeah, that guy's going to threaten Jonathan Brooks when Brooks returns. Nobody's doing that as of now. Now, of course, this can change for these running backs. There's still 3 weeks at least until Jonathan Brooks returns. They'll face the Chargers next week, whose defense looks solid in week 1, albeit they were facing a Raiders offense that didn't look all that great. But either way, Jonathan Brooks next week against the Chargers is going to get 0 points. And the week after that, and the week after that, he's going to get 0 points. Right now is the time. While he's not doing anything and there's no anticipation for him coming back soon, it's going to be another month. Right now is the time to buy low. And just a reminder, from the NFL draft, Jonathan Brooks was taken with the 46th overall pick. That was a 2nd round pick, and the Panthers traded not just their 2nd round pick, swapping 2nd round picks. They also traded 2 5th round picks to go up and get their guy, Jonathan Brooks, for a lot of good reasons. I mean, this guy just has it all. You can see right here above my head, he's 6 foot, he's 216 pounds. Reports now have him closer to 220 pounds. So he has the size. We know that he has speed, and this is a guy, if you scroll down to his college production, his final year, and only his really only year as a starter in college because he was behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. He had played in 10 games, had over 1,100 rushing yards, so averaging over 100 yards a game rushing, had 200 plus receiving yards. When you factor this all in, Jonathan Brooks last year was averaging 142 yards per game, and if you look at just his final 8 games, was averaging 165 yards per game. When we compare him to the running backs in this backfield, at least as prospects, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, Jonathan Brooks is a better pass protector, better in between the tackles runner, better red zone back, and probably a better pass catcher. So buy low on this rookie while he's on people's IRs getting 0 points right now while you still can. Before it's too late. I sounded like a radio voice there. Before it's too late. All right, so next up is going to be Josh Jacobs here. And look, Josh Jacobs, he's a guy who had a great week 1, has made his NFL debut in Brazil on a shitty field, and you're going to get some people concerned because of this right here. Jordan Love is expected to miss 3 to 6 weeks. But if you're reading in between the lines lately, it actually looks a lot better than this, because as my friend Deepak Sports MD Analysis says on Twitter, Jordan Love, he is projecting as a physical therapist and a doctor 2 to 4 weeks. I suspect it's shorter to the timeline, and some of the stuff that's come out since that initial diagnosis of 3 to 6 weeks, Jordan Love is not going on the IR is what they said earlier in the week. That's encouraging for him to come back within the next couple of weeks. And now this is important because I do think Jordan Love might return sooner than people expect, but even if he doesn't, I think it's a good buy low time for Josh Jacobs because of that fear around what the Packers offense will look like under Malik Willis. You can see right here, Josh Jacobs had 16 carries, 2 receptions, so 18 opportunities is strong. 84 rushing yards, 20 receiving, over 100 total yards. This is a guy who struggled in the first half in that game against Philadelphia and came out in the second half and looked like vintage Josh Jacobs behind an adequate offensive line, which is what he didn't have last year with the Raiders. I mean, this is the exact type of back, a guy who could win between the tackles but still has some burst for explosive plays that head coach of the Packers, Matt LaFleur, wanted to bring into this offense this offseason. Now, you can see some highlights from this field right here on Twitter. Dontavian Wicks is just slipping because the field is so bad. This literally happened, I think, on every play, if not every play, every other play in Brazil that a defender or a player on offense was slipping or stumbling. So that is going to factor into these explosive plays were higher than usual. But Josh Jacobs still, again, behind that offensive line, when you watch the film, he looked good. And his usage was great. He ends up playing 49 of 67 snaps. There's a little stretch there in the second quarter where Jacobs was struggling, and Emmanuel Wilson, the undrafted free agent from last year, came in and on his 16 snaps actually looked pretty good on his 4 carries. But overall, this was dominated by one Josh Jacobs without Marshawn Lloyd, the rookie out there, the 3rd round pick. 16 carries to just 4 carries between Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. And now this upcoming week, the Packers are home underdogs because they're not expected to have their quarterback, although he's not technically ruled out right now. They said if he's unavailable, which it kind of seems like they're leaving the door open at least early in the week, but they're not currently expected to have Jordan Love. So if that changes, well, then it changes even better. And right now they're home underdogs against a Colts team. Look, this is a Colts team that last week faced Joe Mixon, and I don't know if you guys saw that, but Joe Mixon had 33 total touches against them, and the Colts almost gave up over 200 total rushing yards to a Texans team that's not known for running the ball. And even if the offensive efficiency drops, I expect they don't want Malik Willis throwing the ball more than 20 times in this game, even if it's that much. Like, I think they're going to lean on Josh Jacobs just like the Texans did last week to an extent with Joe Mixon, and give Jacobs 20 touches minimum in this game is my opinion. I'm not shocked if he's having success to see 24, 25, 26 touches on the ground. So even when there's no Jordan Love out there for the next, let's just call it 1 to 2 to 3 more games, Jacobs is going to get fed a huge workload. Even if the efficiency of the offense drops, his touches will go up to try and counteract that. And then before you know it, Josh Jacobs will be back, and in my opinion, there's no competition for touches. Marshawn Lloyd had 2 different injuries in camp. He's still dealing with a hamstring injury. This is a guy who has had no time to acclimate to the NFL. He's going to take some time. Emmanuel Wilson actually looked good in that debut, but like you saw, just 4 carries to 16 carries for Jacobs, the guy they spent that money on for a 4-year deal, potentially can get out of it after 1 year, but there's no concern here, in my opinion. And the thing that we saw the most that was encouraging, Josh Jacobs, not only did he get 12.4 points, so it's not like he scored a touchdown, had a big week like a James Conner who pushed towards 20 points, so maybe you can still buy low on him. He also had 5.7 yards per touch when you factor this all in, which is a big upgrade from last year, and something that even if they struggle on offense these next 2 to 3 weeks without Jordan Love, I think is worth buying low on right now. Now, by the way, if you're still watching this video, 70% or so of you are not subscribed to this channel. 2 seconds, fellas. The gentleman's agreement. If you can just hit the subscribe button, it goes a long way. I'll keep putting out this helpful content completely free for you. If you just hit that subscribe button, I want to get that closer to 50% by the start or the end of the season, the end of 2024. So thank you all a ton. It takes 2 seconds. If you find this content helpful, hit subscribe. Again, just 2 seconds. Hit the button. What are you doing? Hit the button. It's a gentleman's agreement. Now, the next guy you're not going to be able to buy low, but we told you to buy low on him last week when everybody was worried about Kyren Williams being a punt returner. Well, how foolish do those people look right now? Because Kyren Williams goes out there in week 1 in a brutal matchup. It's behind an injured offensive line of the Rams that look pathetic, and then be against a tough Lions defensive line, and he still ends up earning 14 fantasy points because he finds the end zone because of a massive workload of 21 touches between 3 catches and 18 rush attempts. But the more important part was that Kyren Williams played 71 of 78 snaps. Now, Sean McVay came out after the game and said, we don't want Kyren to be seeing that much usage. Yeah, okay. Well, when the bullets are flying, you're giving Kyren Williams 91% of the snaps. You're giving Ronnie Rivers 7 snaps. You're giving Kyren Williams 18 carries to just 2 for Ronnie Rivers. And where's the rookie? Where's the rookie running back that they drafted in Blake Corum? It doesn't seem like they trusted him enough in an important week 1 game that the Rams were scheming for weeks now to try and get payback from last playoffs. It wasn't there, and they didn't get the payback, you can say, but it did go into overtime. It was a good game, but Blake Corum, as of right now, it wasn't there. Now, here's the deal. This is just week 1 of the season. There's been weeks like last year where Devon Achane was a healthy and active for week 1, and then he goes on to be the #1 running back in fantasy points per opportunity. So this isn't me trying to write off Blake Corum. It's just trying to say don't overreact to when somebody is a punt returner. Because, by the way, Jayden Reed is the Packers punt returner, and Jayden Reed in week 1 had 36 fantasy points. That didn't stop him at all, right? People are overreacting from these things. The truth is, if there was going to be any type of split, we would have saw it in week 1, and we did not see it. We saw 53 snaps, according to PFF, this is on Twitter, from underdog to 0 for Blake Corum in this game, and then that only continued so far as the game went on, where the final snap count in this game was 71 snaps for one Kyren Williams to 0 for Blake Corum. Again, if there was going to be any type of split, like we saw last year in week 1 when Kyren Williams took the job from Cam Akers and didn't look back, we would have seen Blake Corum see usage in week 1. We didn't. I think he'll probably see usage in week 2 or at some point, but right now there's no split here. And maybe a big reason why Kyren Williams saw more usage is because of this right here. The offensive line was banged up and there was 22 pressures on 51 dropbacks versus the Lions in this game. So maybe it's because of the offensive line, and Matthew Stafford had to go old school is what Nick says here on Twitter, and every single stench just to stay alive. And we know that Kyren Williams is a great pass protector, and that's why Sean McVay likes him. But this offensive line, spoiler alert, isn't going to be getting healthy tomorrow. And either way, I don't think this was the whole reason why Kyren Williams is on the field. Sean McVay just trusts him in every key situation. So unfortunately for you, if you weren't able to trade for him last week when we put out that video and said he's a buy low option, you might have to pay a little bit more. But because of the fact that he only had 50 rushing yards, he only had 4 receiving yards, you might be able to get away with it because he only scored 14 fantasy points. And if you're in a half PPR league, he only scored like 12 fantasy points this week, if that. So your friends, your league mates who aren't looking at the snap counts of 91% snaps and Blake Corum not playing, they probably will run into it on Twitter, or maybe they're watching this video, but some of your friends are not. And if those are the managers in your league, we'll go ahead and send another offer for Kyren Williams, because this dude once again is going to look like himself from last year. And you probably want to do it before this week because, like we said, this game environment against the Arizona Cardinals looks fantastic. A 50-point total is as good as it gets these days in the NFL, especially coming off of a gross week 1. And against the Arizona Cardinals, Kyren Williams, an underdog, maybe a couple more receptions, but more importantly, this Cardinals team gave up over 100 total yards to James Cook last week, and also a couple of rushing touchdowns and a lot of rushing production to Josh Allen, the quarterback, as well. I think Kyren Williams rolls this week for 100 plus total yards. Now, this next guy is only going to be for the people who have a little bit of a risk tolerance here, and this is going to be for Chase Brown, who was like a 10th round pick, an exciting 10th round pick over the summer. I took him in a couple of drafts, but his week 1 usage, yeah, it's not going to excite you, fellas. It's not going to excite you at all. Zach Moss, 33 snaps to just 17 for Chase Brown, and the usage goes 9 carries for Zach Moss, including a red zone usage, just 3 for Chase Brown. Now, overall, look, this is just 1 week. The difference in overall touches, if Chase Brown sees 5 and he sees 7 Zach Moss, we're talking more of a split backfield. But based on week 1, it is looking like this is a backfield for Zach Moss, who saw 65% of the snaps compared to just 33%, 17 for Chase Brown. Look, this is not good. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not good, especially when you consider that the Bengals were trailing surprisingly to the Patriots in this game, and we would think that that's the game environment and game pace and overall where Chase Brown's going to get on the field more for some receptions and passing down work. But that didn't happen. It was Zach Moss, who overall, Zach Zach Moss didn't look bad in this game, but you got exactly what you're going to get out of Zach Moss. A guy who can pass protect and a guy who will get you 3 to 4 yards per carry, and that's about it. And that's what we saw in this game. He ends up picking up about 5 yards per carry. There was one big run in there. He catches a couple of balls on his targets, and he has a nice fantasy day of 14 points. I actually think that Zach Moss is, you can hold him if you want to. If you wanted to trade him away, fine. I don't really have a strong opinion on it. If I had to choose, I would say he's probably a trade away option just because I'm still high on Chase Brown for a couple of reasons. Look, here's the thing. And you might be wondering, Sal, why the heck are we trading for Chase Brown if everything you just told us is he looks like a backup running back and Zach Moss doesn't? I might have called Zach Moss Zach Brown earlier. Great artist, by the way. Love the music. And if I did, I apologize. Well, I just think that everything that we learned from last year and this summer when they said he got better as a pass protector, when he looked great and all that coach speak, maybe it was all just Fugazi, but also maybe it's the guy who averaged 5 yards per touch last year, was a workhorse running back in college, seeing over 30 carries often in games, and also he's a highly athletic running back at 210 pounds, has 4.4 speed, has great burst and agility, something that Zach Moss doesn't have. I just think that all these things still matter, and 1 week of production where he only sees 3 carries compared to 9 for Zach Moss shouldn't change that all that much. Maybe it'll take a couple of weeks, but this is still a high end, even if he is a backup running back, at least right now, it's still a high end option in the league. And I also don't think that Joe Burrow is just going to throw for 164 yards on 29 pass attempts most weeks, right? I think the offense is going to get better when T. Higgins comes back. I think the offense is going to get better when Jamar Chase is overall healthy, and that's when we're going to start to see it click. And maybe that's when we start to see some more explosive plays, and maybe they generate those explosive plays from their more explosive running back, Chase Brown, at some point this season. But overall, I think we're going to see a much different offense than what we saw in week 1 in many regards, and maybe that also helps the backfield, at least from a regards of Chase Brown getting more work. And this is according to PFF right here. You can see the usage that that the running backs were getting in this game. It's very concerning for Chase Brown. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You can see the light blue is Chase Brown, the green is Zach Moss. The early down usage right here, according to PFF, was basically split. Okay, so we got a split usage backfield on early downs for snaps, but then the third down usage went to Zach Moss. He played 7 of 9 third down snaps. He played all 3 snaps in the 2-minute offense, got the only goal line carry. That's the concern. The third down back and the passing down back is supposed to be Chase Brown, and I do think that can change at some point this year, because I'm not buying that Zach Moss, an inefficient running back in terms of pass catching responsibilities compared to Chase Brown. I'm not buying that he's going to hold on to this 2-minute offense work and third downs. I think that was maybe just a week 1 thing, especially when the Bengals are trailing and maybe there's a lot more pressure Joe Burrow is facing and they don't feel as comfortable without their top receivers out there going full go. Once they do get back to that mold, I think there's a decent chance we start to see Chase Brown get some third down snaps, or at least more than just the one that he got this past week, and maybe some usage in the 2-minute offense. And if that happens, we go from this being a 65-35% snaps split backfield to a nearly 50-50, and that's all we really wanted when we were taking him in the 10th round, 50-50 and getting 10 to 12 plus touches a game with breakout upside if Moss just completely loses out on the rotation or gets hurt. So Chase Brown is probably getting dropped in some fantasy leagues right now, and if it is, just go ahead and pick him up if it's like a 10-team league. Otherwise, like we talked about earlier with Jaylen Warren, and I would much prefer Jaylen Warren right now because Warren is dealing with an injury while Chase Brown is not, as far as we know. I'd much prefer Jaylen Warren, but I still think that Chase Brown is a trade target. So these are the running backs you should be trading for. Tomorrow, depending on when you're watching this, it could already be out. We're going to talk about the wide receivers you should be trading for, but for right now, until that video releases, we'll put up the waiver wire video for the wide receiver and running backs right here, just in case these guys are still floating out on your waiver wire. Go ahead and check them out. Otherwise, if the video's already out, go ahead and check out the wide receivers. That'll pop up instead right here, the wide receiver trade targets. Best of luck. I'll see you all in the next one, and hit that subscribe button. Hit it. All right, peace out. How you doing? See you later. Peace.